我是陈燕如，非常欢迎并感谢这么多好朋友来参加今天的活动。这是纪念亚太裔传统月的双语云端论坛特别策划，由北美华文作家协会华府分会主办，美国乐龄会美洲分会协办。Welcome and thank you for attending today's event. This is a bilingual, intergenerational Writers Open Mic virtual event, sponsored by North America Chinese Writers Association Greater DC Chapter, and co-sponsored by the AARP Maryland, to commemorate the 2021 Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. 现在为您介绍活动的主办人致开幕词。首先，欢迎北美华文作家协会华府分会2020到2022年的会长王志荣先生。Let me introduce our co-sponsors for their opening remarks. First, let's welcome Mr. Julian Wang, the 2020 to 2022 President of North America Chinese Writers Association Greater DC Chapter.
我是王志荣，北美华文作家协会华府分会的会长。
Hi everyone, I'm Lily Liu, an AARP Maryland volunteer. 我的中文名字是刘以君，我是替王会长来做翻译。So what he just said is I am Julian Wang and I am the president of the North America Chinese Writers Association, Greater Washington, D.C. Chapter.
今天云会的主题是危机与转机，来自亚裔的心声。
The theme that has been chosen for tonight is a very powerful one. From crisis comes opportunity. We raise our voices to be heard.
今天华府作协的会员们在这个困难的时期，仍然坚持要举办这个联系两代华人作家的双语云端会谈。首先要感谢马州乐龄会 AARP Maryland 的支持协办，感谢 AARP 马州义工王生先生和刘以君女士的邀请，支持与牵成 AARP， 也感谢马州蒙郡万象传播公司的陈燕如女士大力支持。
What he just said was we are so very important at this time. The members of this chapter felt compelled in their hearts to sponsor this bilingual and intergenerational event at this very tough time. He was so kind to thank the AARP Maryland team and to express the sincerest gratitude of this chapter for their sponsorship in collaboration with this Writers Association chapter.
由于去年最早的新冠疫情爆发点在中国，而后美国又几乎是全球最严重的疫区之一，整个美国社会处于不安的情况中，许多人就将愤怒的情绪转向报复亚洲人甚至华人。
I think all of you can hear the passion in President of this chapter, Julian Wang's voice. Since the earliest outbreak of this COVID-19 virus was in China at the beginning of last year, and because the United States has been one of the most severely affected countries in the world, our entire American society has been in a state of anxiety. And so many people have turned their anger into racist hatred against Asians, especially Chinese Americans.
但这段期间，随着全球各地反亚裔仇恨不断升温，发生了一连串攻击亚裔的事件。亚裔在社会的各层面上遭受比过去更多的种族歧视。
Unfortunately, during this past year, as anti-Asian hatred around the world has continued to rise, most recently with a terrible series of attacks against Asian Americans, they have occurred all around this country. And Asians from all levels of American society have suffered more racial hostility than in the past.
同样是美国公民， 美国华人不只要应付疫情的风险，还要应付来自社区的歧视与更多不公平的待遇。
Even though we are, many of us, American citizens, so many Chinese Americans not only have had to deal with the dangers of this pandemic, but also, unfortunately, with discrimination in our own communities and other unfair treatment.
我们华府作协深感必须与所有亚太裔美国人一起分享我们共同的心情感受。
This is why, for the very first time, this chapter decided to create literary works in both Chinese and in English translations to express our deepest felt feelings and concerns.
这也是华府作家协会第一次尝试用华文与英文文学的作品，并以中英文双语发声，写出我们对美国社会的关怀，并利用网络社媒、视讯和平面等媒体广为宣传，希望能引起更多美国社会大众关注这个现象。
So what Julian just said was that tonight's an experiment, so please bear with us if there are some technical glitches or other surprises. But this chapter feels very, very strongly that we must put things out in multiple languages, in both Chinese and in English translation. So this is the very first time there has ever been a bilingual event. And don't forget that all of these writings in the future will be put on the website of this chapter and the association. And because of the wonderful connections of all of these members of this chapter, things will also appear in local media and on other sites so that you can enjoy all of these works in both Chinese and English in their complete form.
我们非常荣幸能够邀请今晚活动的共同赞助者，欢迎马州 AARP 义工主席 James Campbell 致辞。
So today now, Julian is very, very honored to be able to give the stage and the microphone to the co-sponsor, AARP Maryland's volunteer state president, Mr. James Jim Campbell, a dear friend of all of us here in the Chinese American community in Maryland. Take it away, Mr. Campbell.
Miss Lily, it's all right to call you Lily. Thank you very much for your very, very kind comments. And I want to thank Mr. Wang for introducing me, recognizing us, and for his passion. I share his passion for this issue. It's something we feel strongly about. We want to work closely with you. I love the idea that it's bilingual. I don't love the idea that there's a thunderstorm right outside my door. But other than that, I want to thank you, Mr. Wang, for your comments tonight. We really look forward to working with you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
大家好，我一会儿会为Campbell 先生做翻译。我的名字叫王申，我是马里兰的 AARP 马里兰州的义工。那么今天晚上我们很高兴Miss Campbell 先生能够在我们的活动之前给我们致辞。Welcome, Miss Campbell. If you can introduce some of the AARP Maryland organization. 我们下面请 Miss Campbell 先生介绍一下马里兰州的 AARP 马里兰州办公室。Welcome, Miss Campbell.
I did want to say Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders have helped shape this country's history, as we all know. This May, during Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month, AARP honors that legacy, both the empowering and painful chapters of the history. We're thrilled to continue celebrating unique perspectives of our diverse storytellers tonight. We also support the advocates who continue to uplift voices and ensure the community's needs are heard.
Miss Campbell 先生，他们很高兴参与今天晚上的活动，作为一个 co-sponsor。同时呢，他也为亚太裔，在美国全美的这些亚太裔的这些人们感到为他们感到高兴。也希望全美的这种多样化能够为这个国家的兴旺带来兴旺。那么在这个时候，我们也特别尊重特别是利用这个时机，利用这个亚太裔的传统月来表达对亚裔人士在美国的亚裔人士的尊敬，为他们做出的贡献表示感谢。
This year, recent tragic events in the news and across the country had led AARP to take a stronger stance against hate targeting of our Asian American communities. First and foremost, AARP condemns social injustice in all forms and aims to continuously educate people about racial inequity.
今年随着亚裔在美国的以及世界各地的突然的爆发，那 AARP 站起来为亚裔来呼声，同时谴责在各个地方发生的对亚裔的歧视的行为。
As part of AARP's goal to uplift and support the Asian American community, we are providing support for organizations such as the Chinese Writers to bring visibility to their work. Thank you for including me tonight. Thank you for including AARP Maryland. We're really looking forward to this as a beginning that we can continue to work together on other projects. So thank you for this opportunity.
借着对亚裔的支持，我们也特别参加今天晚上由华府作协举办的这次活动，借以表达我们对他们的关注，对他们的支持，再一次的感谢，邀请我们参加今晚的活动。那么今天我也是今天活动的聊天室的协调主持，所以呢，欢迎大家对今晚的活动，如果可以留言。I'm also the moderator of the chat room tonight's event. Welcome. If you have any comment, please welcome send it to the chat room.
现在请华府作协陈慧清介绍北美作协总会会长吴宗锦先生。
嗨，大家好，我是陈慧清。现在由我来介绍吴宗锦先生。吴宗锦先生是台南人，台湾大学毕业，1983年移居到美国，担任华府华商年鉴华人电话部的发行人兼总编辑，现任北美洲华文作家协会的总会长，南加州文苑杂志发行人兼总编辑，华商世界杂志社副社长兼总编辑，著作有《美国新家园》、《锦绣神州》等等9本书，还有其他的图书杂志数百种。
It is my honor to be able to interpret the beautiful introduction that the Secretary of the Washington, D.C. chapter, Ms. Chen Hui-ying, had just said about this illustrious author that we're very honored to have with us. Mr. Wu is based in Southern California. He is a very, very prolific writer. And all of us in North America and literally all over the world love his writings because he uses simple prose. He's able to write about his own lived experience, and all the readers love it because they share similar life experiences. So tonight we are so honored that Mr. Wu has joined us all the way from Southern California, and we're going to be able to hear a beautiful piece that he has written and that will really resonate with all of you about the pandemic. Thank you.
我是吴宗锦，北美洲华文作家协会总会长。今天我要念的是《社交距离》这篇文章，是去年4月28号刊登在《世界日报》的家园版。在居家禁足期间，即使必须到超市买菜或者药局取药，人与人之间，政府也规定要保持安全社交距离，至少6英尺以上。因为这项规定，在超市、药局遇到熟人亲友，也是不能寒暄握手，改为挥手致意或者拱手作揖，更要避免交谈，以防口水四射。因为儿子一家没有买到口罩，我特地情商一位在中国东莞有口罩工厂的亲友，直接从中国大陆寄了100个口罩给他。前几天口罩寄到了，而我自己的口罩也所剩无几，就联络儿子说，我找时间开车过去取一些，请他把口罩准备好，拿到外面的车窗，丢到我的车上，我就不进去他家，以免误带病菌传给他们。儿子住在洛杉矶的西边，我和太太 母亲住在洛杉矶东边的华人区，开车要1个小时左右。想到他们一家4口居家隔离这么久，可能很想吃中国食物，我就顺便带了一点鼎泰丰小笼包之类的外卖给他们解解馋。但我事先声明说我不跟他们一起吃。儿子虽然在家上班，但是还是得遵守他们公司上班的规定作息，就约我中午休息时间到，他把40个口罩给我，然后拿走我买给他们的外卖，2个人都保持社交距离。我已经有2个多月没有抱到孙子。当我到达儿子家的时候，把车子停在他家对面的路边，儿子和2个孙子正在家前面的空地上玩篮球等我。儿子看到我来了，就叫2个孩子留在原地，远远地跟我挥挥手，他自己过街来取我放在车子后座上的外卖，并把40个口罩放在我车上。眼看着2个可爱的孙子老远地伴着爷爷来，却不能留下来跟他们一起吃饭，并抱抱他们，我的心里突然一阵酸楚。但要怪也只能怪新冠肺炎病毒，不知道这恶毒的病毒夺走了多少人的温暖的家庭幸福。第2天月报得知全美新冠肺炎疫情更加严重，报上还刊登一则新闻说，想念孙子女长辈距社交距离，父母很头痛。这不就很像我发生的情况吗？只是我为了保护孙子们和儿子一家的健康，特意保持比社交距离更远的距离，只摇下车窗，远远地看着2个孙子跟我挥手，内心虽然感到难过，而且8岁和5岁大的孙子也不一定能够理解为什么，但是为了彼此的健康着想，也只能忍心的这么做了。祈祷这个世纪病毒赶快被消灭，解药和疫苗赶快研发出来，使整个世界尽快恢复原有的秩序，重新回到美好的正常生活。
The English translation is eagerly awaited. I'm delighted to introduce a bright young millennial friend, Jessica, who's going to come and share the piece in English translation.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jessica Xiao, and I'm the Director of Communications and Strategic Engagement at the Asian American Journalists Association, where I'm excited to support AAPI leadership and AAPI stories in media and journalism. I am a National Urban Fellow of Georgetown University's McCourt School of Public Policy with a Master's in Public Policy Management and a Bachelor of Arts and Science in Psychology and Economics from McGill University. Thank you for this opportunity to read the English translation of Mr. Wu's beautiful work that so aptly describes a very common experience this past year. Thank you to the Chinese Writers Association DC chapter and AARP Maryland for hosting this wonderful AAPI Heritage Month event.
我现在为大家介绍 Jessica。Jessica 的中文名字是肖杰倩，她是亚裔美国记者协会的传播策略主任，专注于亚裔的传媒报道。杰倩是乔治城大学的研究员，是麦吉尔大学经济学与心理学的学士，以及公共政策管理硕士。杰倩说，他很高兴有这个机会以英语朗诵吴先生的作品。这篇文章生动地描述了过去1年大家共同的经历。杰倩也感谢华府作协和 AARP 马州分会赞助这次的活动。
Today, I will read the essay Social Distancing by Mr. Wu, originally published in the Tuesday, April 28th, 2020 issue of the World Journal. During the pandemic, stay-at-home orders, even when it was necessary to go to the supermarket to buy groceries or to the drugstore to pick up medications, the government stipulated that everyone must maintain a safe social distancing of at least 6 feet. Because of this mandate, when going to the supermarket or pharmacy, you cannot shake hands to greet your acquaintances and friends. Instead, we can only wave or use the fist and palm salute. Even more important, we have to avoid conversation so as not to scatter any spittle. Because my son's family was unable to purchase masks, I made a special appeal to a friend who has a mask factory in Dongguan, China, to send him 100 masks. A few days ago, the masks arrived, and my own supply of masks was running low. I called my son and told him I would drive over to pick up some masks. I asked him to pack some up and hand them over through my car window. I would not enter his house so as to not risk bringing any virus into their home. My son lives on the western side of Los Angeles. My wife, my mother, and I live on the eastern side of Los Angeles, where a lot of Chinese Americans live. It takes about an hour to drive to my son's house. Thinking that their family of 4, having been in isolation for so long, might wish to eat some Chinese food, I stopped by Ding Tai Feng restaurant and picked up some takeout steamed meat buns to satisfy their appetite. But I firmly told them in advance that I would not be eating with them. Although my son has been working from home, he still has to follow his company's work schedule. So we decided that I would arrive around his lunch break. He would give me 40 masks, take the food I would pick up for them. The 2 of us would maintain social distancing. It has been more than 2 months since I hugged my grandchildren. When I arrived at my son's house, I parked my car on the side of the road opposite his house. My son, his 2 grandsons, had been playing basketball in the open space in front of the house as they waited for me. When my son saw that I had arrived, he asked the 2 children to stay where they were and waved to me from a distance. He crossed the street by himself to get the takeout food I had placed on the back seat and to put the 40 masks in my car. I could see my 2 adorable grandsons were looking forward to their grandfather coming to visit, but I couldn't stay to enjoy a meal together, nor hug them. I felt heartbroken. But we can only blame this new coronavirus. Who knows how many families this vicious virus has robbed of warmth and joy. The next day, I learned from reading the newspaper that the coronavirus situation was becoming more serious. An article reported, missing their grandchildren, grandparents refused to socially distance, a headache for parents. Wasn't this just like what I had experienced? But in order to protect the health of my grandsons and my son's family, I deliberately maintained a distance greater than the mandatory 6 feet for social distancing. I could only roll down my car window and watch my 2 grandsons wave at me from a distance. Although I felt sad inside, and my 8-year and 5-year-old grandsons probably didn't understand why, this was what we had to do for the sake of each other's health. I pray that this once-in-a-century virus will be wiped out quickly, and that an antidote and a vaccine will be developed quickly so that the whole world can return to its original order as soon as possible, and we can all return to a beautiful, normal life.
Tonight, we are so lucky that we have Mr. Wu with us live. So to take advantage of his wisdoms, Ms. Chen Huiqing and he will come on and we'll have a Q&A session so that we have some live exchange with such a famous and kind writer. And then in order to help our English language friends on here, what we'll do is we'll have the authors first say their entire response, and then we'll help translate. And Jessica will get the summary of what he will say in its entirety. Okay, please, Ms. Secretary Chen, it's all yours.
在1年多以来的疫情期间，我们读到吴会长在报章杂志上发表了不少的文章。请问吴会长，在疫情严峻的情况下，你写作的心情和平常的写作有何不同？谢谢。
During the pandemic, for more than a year, we have read in the newspaper many essays that you have written as the Writers Association president, Mr. Wu. May I ask you, during the most severe period of this pandemic, how did your mood for writing change?
这个疫情期间呢，居家禁足刚开始啊，心情受到一点点影响，但是后来就发现，因为减少了很多的这个社交活动，时间反而多了出来，写作的时间反而多了。唯一受到影响的是没有办法去旅行， 有很多旅行计划都取消了，因为我有一些游记的出版计划呢，也只好被迫取消或者延期。我本来去年9月要去西藏旅行，是要写一本关于大陆的游记的一部分，但因为疫情的关系就没办法去了，只好取消。
During the pandemic, at the beginning of the stay-at-home mandate, my mood was slightly affected, but then I found that because of a lot of social activities were canceled, there was actually more time and therefore more time for writing. The only thing that really was affected was that because of the inability to travel, many travel plans had to be canceled. So some of the essays that I had planned to write about on these trips was going to take had to be postponed or canceled. Originally, I had planned to travel to Tibet in September 2020. These writings were going to be part of my travel journal about mainland China, but because of the pandemic, I've had to postpone these plans.
想要请问吴会长，疫情期间的社交距离有没有影响到您及你的子女们的祖孙感情，或者有没有影响到你和你家人的关系？谢谢。
President Wu, has the social distancing during the pandemic affected your relationship with your grandsons or your relationship with your family?
社交距离的规定呢，是为了保护彼此之间免受到这个新冠肺炎病毒的感染。为了家人的健康，我们当然一定要严格的遵守，就像我在社交距离英文中所写的一样。但我们总是有办法维持跟亲人之间的感情。我和孙子之间呢也一样，在疫情比较缓和之后呢，我就安排让我儿子呢带2个孙子回到我家来，让他们呢在家里的后院玩耍。他们不让他们进入屋内，那我们让孩子在外面玩，我跟他们的奶奶啊，还有他们的阿祖啊，就隔着窗看着小孩在那玩耍，跟他们打招呼。那个子孙之间的感情应该是不会受到影响的。谢谢。
谢谢吴会长。
The social distancing mandate is to protect everyone from infection from this new coronavirus. So of course it must be strictly followed for the health of the family. But just as I wrote in my essay, Social Distancing, we always have a way to maintain the relationship with our relatives. And the same is true in this relationship with my grandsons. After the cases of COVID-19 drop somewhat, I'll arrange to have my son find time to bring my grandsons to Grandpa's house and let them play in the backyard. We won't let them enter the house, but Grandpa and Grandma can watch them play, and we can wave and we can talk to them through the window. Our intergenerational ties should not be affected in this way.
Yes.
好的，谢谢。吴宗锦先生、陈慧清女士以及肖杰倩女士。Thank you very much, Mr. 宗锦吴、慧清陈 and Miss Jessica Xiao。我们现在进行下一段。现在请华府作协前会长龚泽运博士介绍周武平医师。Now, Dr. Julian Kang, past president, Chinese Writers Association, will introduce the second speaker, Dr. Mo-Ping Chow.
谢谢燕如的简介大家晚上好我是龚泽运，或叫做龚泽运。那么我现在事实上是北美洲华文作家协会的秘书长，我们的总会长也在这里吴宗锦会长。那我已经出版了8本中文书。今天晚上其实是非常荣幸的，请到我们大华府的名医那个周武平医生来跟我们大家做一个演讲。那他是我们这边很出名的一个家庭医生在我们这边开业，也是泛亚义务门诊创办医生之一。那么他是毕业于香港培盛中学，而且也是台湾国防医学院毕业的。那么他也是那个院士就是那个内科学院，美国内科学院的院士。那么他呢，今天晚上他要跟大家演讲的题目是疫情中亚裔医生的感想。那么等一下就有周医生的录音演讲。
Thank you so much, past president of this chapter, Doctor with a PhD, Julian Gong, spelled K-I-A-N-G. You yourself are such a prolific writer, so we're very honored to have you join our event today. Her introduction of Dr. Zhou was perfect. He is such a hero in our community right now because during this pandemic, he and his team of volunteers have done so much for the housebound, homebound elders and their families. He writes from that perspective, trained from the physician's eye, but also with the heart of gold. He, I don't think, has had a day of rest during this pandemic. We're lucky to have him because he also brings something from Hong Kong, having been raised in Hong Kong, and then as an internist, family physician, a general practitioner, he had training both in Taiwan and in the United States. So we are so lucky that he has decided to reside here in the Maryland area and become our Saint Dr. Zhou. So we're so lucky to be able to see his writing tonight.
我是周武平医师，我是在华府开业的内科家庭医师，那也是泛亚义务门诊的义工啊。今天很高兴能够跟大家讲一下我在疫情中一个亚裔医生的感触或者感想啊。在这段漫长的疫情中，我见证了不少令人唏嘘的故事。不但让我体会到生命的脆弱跟无奈，也感受到亲情的藕断丝连，感觉就是近在咫尺，但是又觉得好像遥不可及啊。那还有就是民众往往就觉得医护人员好像是病毒的携带者，常常躲避着我们，好像走过很远很远，他就跟我打招呼，是很客气啊，但是不会走得很近啊。所以我们医护人员也会觉得变得很敏感。那病人更是到诊所或者到医院，他觉得是很害怕，视为畏途啊，因此这样往往是耽误了病情。再加上亚裔他担心言语不通，上医院没人陪伴哦，所以更加害怕。但是因为这样，所以受害更深。但我们身为医生，也尽量用各种的方法予以劝导跟协助他们啊。虽然在这个困难的时机，我们也可以在困难中看得到社区人性的光辉啊！举个例子，就是像由义工团组成的美金华人活动中心，跟他旗下的泛亚义务门诊部啊，就是一个很好的例子。因为这个泛亚门诊部，它除了例行为有困难的病人看病之外，也鉴于政府最近给亚裔的资源相对的比较不够啊，比起其他的族类不足，所以我们更积极的向政府部门争取，成立了新冠病毒检测站，还有更重要的是说，我们也有这个疫苗的接种站。那我们专门是为一些被遗忘在黑暗角落，因为有些他是有困难，他不知道怎么上网啊，他没有办法得到帮助，所以除了亚裔之外，也包括其他的族裔的弱势团体，我们也为他们服务。总的来讲，美国是一个移民的国家，也是个民主的移民国家，每一个族裔他们都做出了巨大的贡献。所以这一次的疫情对美国的伦理或者道德都是一次考验。不过当我们要修正一个错误之前，先要承认这个错误，并且要正视它虽然这次亚裔因为受疫情的关系被不当的歧视，但是也希望因为这样能够被正视之后变成一个转机，让大家警觉。因为我们大家共处一个屋檐下，是应该互相扶持，来一起建立一个美好的家园这是我的宗旨，我的想法也是我的意见就跟大家分享希望大家喜欢，谢谢。
Once again, this translation is absolutely worth waiting for. And once again, we have a millennial friend She's based all the way in Southern California and has decided to join us so that she can also share how this really resonated with her background and her training. So take it away, Jia Yingding, please.
Thank you, Lily. Hi, everyone. My name is Jia Yingding, and I am a hospital chaplain and organizer. I graduated with a Master's of Divinity from Harvard Divinity School in 2018, and I'm currently based in Los Angeles. And I feel so honored to read this essay by Dr. Zhou in translation. Reflections of a Chinese American physician during the pandemic. During this endless pandemic, I have witnessed many sad stories that have not only made me understand the fragility and helplessness of life, but have also made me experience the fraying and even rupture of the ties that bind us all, so close and yet so far. People have come to regard healthcare workers as carriers of the COVID virus and avoid us. As a result, we physicians and other healthcare workers have become sensitive to this behavior. Patients have even considered clinics and hospitals as dangerous places and therefore delayed seeking medical care. In addition, Asian Americans have been afraid to enter the hospital and being isolated, unable to have family members nearby, and experiencing difficulties in communicating, thus adding to their suffering. We healthcare workers can only try our best to persuade them to seek our help. But even in this difficult situation, we can still see the bright side of human nature in our community. For example, at the Chinese Cultural and Community Service Center, CCACC, the staff of the Pan-Asian Volunteer Health Clinic, PAHC, and the Adult Day Healthcare Center, ADHC, have continued to volunteer. We have continued to provide medical care for those in need. And given the insufficient public resources for Asian Americans, we have actively sought out assistance from government agencies. We have also set up sites to test for the virus and to administer vaccinations to help the forgotten, not only Asian Americans, but also members of other vulnerable ethnic groups. The United States is a democracy made up of immigrants. Immigrants from all ethnic groups have made great contributions to this country. The pandemic has been a test of the American ethos. Before we can correct any mistake, we must first admit the mistake and face it head on. Although Asian Americans have been unjustly discriminated against because of the pandemic, we hope to be treated fairly. This could be an inflection point, an awakening. We could all live under the same roof, and we should support one another to build together a beautiful home.
Beautiful, Jia Ying. Jia Ying, that was just wonderful. So Yan will help us because I don't know how to say Master of Divinity, 哈佛大学的硕士, but I don't know how to say Master of Divinity.
是的，让我为大家介绍丁佳莹。佳莹毕业于哈佛神学院，拥有神学硕士学位。她目前在洛杉矶是医院的牧师。佳莹说，她很荣幸今天能以英语朗诵周医师的文章。
All of these millennials are 非常非常优秀的年轻人。Thank you again, Jia Ying. So now 龚那个博士 and Dr. Zhou 会上来，我们会谈一谈那个问题。
我是龚泽玉的爷哈。那么那个周医师你也是一个很好的作家呀，你最近写了好几篇有关疫情的文章，想请问您，就是这个背后的驱动力、动机是什么呢？请你跟我们分享。
Yeah, before I answer the question, I have to thank Lily for your translation and the beautiful reading from Jia Ying. You know, honestly, I think it is even better than my Chinese version. I really mean it. Thank you. 那我回到那个龚博士的那个问题哈，主要我写这个文章的目的是希望利用这文章或者这个平台做3件事情。第一个呢，就是表达或者是疏解我在这个疫情之间的一个感觉 跟我的一个意见给大家分享。第二个呢，就是刚才我也提到，就是很多尤其中国人或者是亚裔他们都很害怕进医院生病，但是我们知道，在这个疫情中，你该有病，你并不会请假，所以你该看病的时候还是要看病。我给大家一个指引。那要是你万一得到了这个新冠病的话呢，也不要恐慌你应该自己知道什么情况下来保护自己。好比说你要家里备一个测氧器啦等等，或者到有问题的时候你要怎么样，要找你的家庭医生，或者需要去医院，给大家一个指导。那第三点呢也是很重要，就是说我希望讲述这个疫苗是怎么样研发的，它的研发过程，它是不是它的效果是怎么样，或者它会有什么的副作用，跟大家讲清楚，大家比较有信心都会踊跃来注射疫苗，因为这样子的话，我们很快能够达到这个 herd immunity， 就是群体免疫，这个群体的免疫，希望这个疫情能够早点结束，这就是我的意愿。
您的出发点实在是令我很感动呀！现在请佳音来翻译成英文。
Thank you, Julian. So the question was, you have written recently several articles about the pandemic, and what was your motivation? And Dr. Zhou expressed that a couple points. Number one, he wanted to express the emotions of medical personnel during the pandemic. Number two, he wanted to educate the public about how to seek medical care, as well as protect their health during the pandemic. And number three, he wanted to explain the history of vaccine research and the development and their effectiveness and safety, so the public could be encouraged to feel comfortable in getting vaccinated and in then ending this pandemic as soon as possible.
谢谢佳音您的翻译非常的贴切，非常的令人家就是产生共鸣。那我现在来请问周医生第二个问题，就是能不能请你告诉我们说，华人活动中心还有就是那个泛亚医务门诊在疫情中为这个社区做了什么样的工作，让大家能够多明白一些，请你跟我们分享。
是的，我们大家知道这个华人活动中心在这个地区都有30多年的历史了，然后这个泛亚门诊也是从2003年开始，也有快20年的历史了。那泛亚门诊基本它开始的初衷是为一些没有保险、贫穷的或者言语也有困难的人服务。但是在这个疫情期间呢，华人活动中心跟泛亚门诊希望把这个服务能够扩展开来。那当然就是除了还是用视讯跟病人看病之外，那华人活动中心作为一个这个社区的一份子，也希望能够有点贡献，所以就鼓励华人能够捐钱或捐物资，他作为一个桥梁，给社区的一些团体，好比说医院啦，或者是那个邮政局啦，和临终照护的一些单位啦，这样子。然后另外呢，也对一些老人家，尤其在家里面不能出来的老人家，给他带药去还有带他们去看医生、送餐，甚至可以有一些居家护理对跟他们这方面的帮助。那另外还有一些老人家在家里呢，我们会给他们用那个上线，给他们一些上课，好比说那个这个心理方面的或者身体方面，让他们学到一些东西。但是最重要的还是我们尽量向政府那边争取一些资源，就是在那个疫苗方面的施打从3月份开始，差不多定期，我们都有在这方面给一些，我们目标主要是对那些很难拿到资源的这些民众但除了亚裔之外，其他的这个族类要是有困难，我们也是很乐意去帮忙的。所以我们希望就像我们总统讲的，到7月4号，大家很高兴一起就去庆祝国庆吧，就是这个意思。谢谢。
谢谢周医生跟我们家分享，我们家对那个华人活动中心就了解了很多。现在请佳音 ，please translate 佳音。
Yes, gladly, Julian. So the question was, can you please tell us what the Chinese Culture and Community Service Center, CCACC, and the Pan-Asian Volunteer Health Clinic, PAHC, have done for our Chinese American community during this pandemic? And Dr. Zhou's reply was in several pieces. So the Chinese Culture and Community Service Center, CCACC, was actually established more than 30 years ago. And the second organization, the Pan-Asian Volunteer Health Clinic, PAHC, was established in 2003. The clinic's main purpose is to provide healthcare services for low-income, uninsured individuals with limited English proficiency. And during the pandemic, in addition to providing telehealth consultations, we expanded the scope of our services. We collected monetary donations and personal protective equipment from generous members of our Chinese American community and donated these to area hospitals and other community service organizations. We also delivered food and medications to the elderly and provided medical and nursing services for the homebound. We also provided for the elders in our community some regular virtual programs on mental and physical health topics, and we set up a COVID-19 test site. By March of this year, we started to receive vaccines from the government, and our team of volunteers regularly helped to vaccinate individuals who had difficulty in accessing such resources.
谢谢周武平医师与我们分享他的文章，也谢谢龚博士为我们进行问答，也要感谢嘉莹为我们做这么好的翻译。Thank you, Dr. Mo Ping Chow, Dr. Chow for sharing the essay, and also thank you, Dr. Kong, for the Q&A session, and also we want to thank Jia Ying for the beautiful translation. 接下来我们要播一段录像，这是由华府作协财务长胡一霞女士为大家介绍作者胡淑涵女士朗读我的经历。The next video is Miss Yixia Hu, Treasurer, Chinese Writers Association, introduces the next speaker, Miss Shuhan Hu, and her reading of my experience.
大家好，我是胡一霞，华府华文作家协会的总务。这一段的节目，我们请到了胡淑涵小姐来谈谈她作为美籍华人在这1年中的个人的经验和感受。Hi everyone, my name is Yixia Hu. I'm the Administrative Officer of North America Chinese Writers Association DC chapter. In this segment of our program, we invited Ms. Shuhan Hu to talk about her personal experience during this past year. Shuhan grew up in New Jersey with her parents, grandparents, and brother. She went to Rutgers University in New Brunswick and majored in English literature and political science. After college, she went to live in Taipei, Taiwan for 2 years and traveled all over Southeast Asia. After returning to the United States, she has been living in New York City and working in news and media. It's nice to have you, Shuhan.
Thank you, Isha. And thank you to the Chinese Writers Association for having me this evening. My experience as an Asian American woman living in New York City during the pandemic has been illuminating on many levels. As a second-generation Chinese Taiwanese immigrant, I grew up in the comforts of suburbia, blessed in not facing many hardships or losses. This changed when the pandemic hit, as COVID-19 has spurred both hardships and losses for everyone. Many of us are facing unemployment, deaths, relocation, and isolation. These are all situations that could break a person's spirit. However, I believe there is light to be found amidst the darkness. The pandemic had provided time for reflection. The blessing this pandemic has given me is time to think, time to create, and time to initiate change. Being isolated from friends and family during the height of the pandemic last summer, I found an intense desire to look within. Rather than seeking comfort in others as I had always done, I was forced to be still as the city around me shut down. As desolate and isolated as the city was, there was beauty all around me. The streets were empty, and I was able to cruise down 2nd Avenue on my bike, unencumbered by trucks and buses. I had time to take long walks, face fully covered in complete anonymity, enjoying the quiet wonders the city has to offer. These experiences created space for stillness, something rarely found in the bustling city beforehand. One feeling that stands out in my memory was the freedom in which I felt in anonymity. Face fully covered by a mask, eyes covered by sunglasses, I felt a sense of security. In my time of reflection, I realized I felt that way because I didn't feel as if I was immediately labeled as Asian, an identity that in America had become a dangerous one to be. Although the Black Lives Movement started back in 2013, it took up a new momentum last summer when the video of George Floyd's murder went viral. George Floyd was murdered by police officer Derek Chauvin in Minneapolis, and the people demanded justice. As someone who believes deeply in human rights, I was up in arms with my community, demanding justice for George Floyd's family. I needed to make a difference and help the cause. I marched the streets, I volunteered my time, my money. I wanted to be an ally to my friends and community in any way I could. However, there were moments where I didn't know where I fit into the movement as an Asian American. Asian Americans fill a very different space than Black Americans. Our histories and cultures are so different. But I felt that at the base of it all, we were fighting for human lives, and I wanted to be on the right side of things. I was swept up by New York City's euphoric energy and felt as if I was doing all that I could. Juxtaposing last summer to the recent racially motivated attacks on Asian Americans, I thought I would be even louder, even angrier than I was when I was marching for Black lives. I had the opportunity to fight for my people. However, the opposite happened. I did not find solace in the solidarity of the movement. Rather, I shrank away from it. I did not prioritize any protests, didn't volunteer any time. Rather, I was overwhelmed by fear. I was scared to go outside. Anyone and everyone was seen as a potential threat. And it was then when I comprehended the suffering that Black Americans go through every day. To fear those who are supposed to protect you must alter one's psyche and one's concept of self-worth. I had never lived in fear before, and having felt that deep-seated fear for my safety put things into perspective. I asked myself why I shrank away from the Stop AAPI hate movement in New York when I was ever so loud during the BLM movement. I realized that it wasn't the message of the movements that were different, but rather how it was personal now, and I was the victim. I felt the weight of the movement, and it was crushing. I understood why not all Black people wanted to march at the BLM protests. I saw the importance for allies to stand up for these issues, not just those who are victimized, for systemic change to occur. I chose to speak on this topic because I believe everyone deserves to feel safe, to be protected by the safeguards society has placed. And when those safeguards are not doing their job, they need to change. I'm speaking for all those who are disenfranchised. Seeing how America responded to the COVID-19 pandemic made me sad for this country. How a virus became politicized and radicalized reveals how broken and polarized this country is. The isolation at the start of the pandemic created space for me to dig deep and truly listen to my convictions. The solidarity that was spawned by the pandemic has given me the platform to follow through on these convictions. This month is AAPI Heritage Month. I do not speak for all AAPIs. I can only speak for myself. But seeing how society has reacted to both stopping AAPI hate and the BLM movement, I believe we are fighting the same fight.
非常谢谢舒涵的分享，也谢谢伊霞的介绍。因为这篇文章比较长一点， 所以呢，我们就不在这里为大家朗读。中文的翻译将会发表在华府作协的网站上，以及社区报纸华府新闻日报和华美商报。Thank you very much for Shuhan's sharing her essay and also Isha's introduction. Because this essay is a little bit too long for us to translate that in Chinese and read it here, so we will publish the complete translation in Chinese at Chinese Writers Association's website and also some of the local newspapers. 我们刚刚听了三段散文，我们现在要来欣赏诗歌。刘以君女士将用英文为大家介绍诗人严厉先生。Now we'll change from essays to poetry. Miss Lily Liu will introduce the poet, Mr. Li Yan, in English. Lily.
Yeah. Thank you so much, MC Yan. It's so interesting because today you're really getting an appetizer, 点心, a little bit of each. But the Chinese are also very famous for poetry, thousands of years, millennia. And so we're very lucky to have a live poet in the sense of Mr. Yan Li has come to us based from originally Beijing to bring his perspective to 21st century America, life in this pandemic, life among the Asian, anti-Asian hate movement, to be able to express his thoughts and his heart. He is quite a Renaissance man. He does both painting, he does poetry. And so we are so lucky tonight to have a beautiful recording of two of his poems. And you're gonna love the, we call it 朗诵 in Chinese, the reciting by one of the chapter's own leaders. So we will now play the tape.
我叫高霞，是本届华府作协副会长。今天我给大家朗读严厉老师的2首诗。严厉，北京人，1985年留学美国，他是著名朦胧式诗人、旅美画家，纽约一行诗社社长。2018年出任纽约法拉盛诗歌节主办人。同年出任纽约海外华文作家笔会会长。第一首，我的2020，我的也是医院的2020，很多人出院的机会比入院少了一次。我的也是快递业的2020。我下单，在货物的林中，物字成为了打包的阳光。我的也是居家创作的2020，诗篇和画作，不知道哪个句子或哪一笔颜色可以健康的通过将来的核酸检测。我担心下笔太快，很多次没能保持好平民与政治的社交距离。我的也是各类吹哨人的2020，他们的顽强在被匆匆定论的句号里突围成逗号，接着起身成为问号，最后挺直成的惊叹号，却又被悄然锯断，成为散落在地的一串无解的引号。我的也是口罩的2020，但它拦不住趁机释放自生病毒的各种团体。到底有多少体制内外的天使被扼杀，只能期望于来年的各路正义的神探。我的也是 COVID-19 的2020，借酒浇愁的酒量喝出了我洞见平底的虚无岁月，但我还是看见了人类酒庄正在繁忙地运出一箱箱打了疫苗的2021。第二首， 穷人 the poor person, 20块补丁 20 scraps of fabric, 一左一右 left and right, 在月光下劳动 under the moonlight, laboring, 好面熟的风 so familiar the wind, 你补着 you have repaired, 残破的天空 the threadbare sky. 谢谢大家。
Such a beautiful poem that expressed all of his emotions during the 2020, the entire repetition of my 2020. He expressed so many deep thoughts about the pain, the isolation, and the fear that he felt living in New York City. So it is just an amazing use of a traditional Chinese genre of poetry to talk about something that is happening to us right now in the 21st century. And now we're going to bring back on the stage Mr. Julian Wang to give some closing remarks for this evening's event.
谢谢大家，这是华府华文作协会长王志荣 again。今天非常感谢所有上网的好朋友和贵宾，也感谢 co-sponsor AARP Maryland State President Jim Campbell 开幕致辞。也看到许多好朋友，看到因为好朋友 State Director Hank Greenberg 也在网上，感谢今天所有演讲的作家精彩的分享和年轻一代英文作家的杰出文章和翻译，也感谢所有华府作协干事会的成员，他们都花了很多的时间和精力，共同完成今晚的节目。本届华文作协干事会的任期是从去年的8月到明年的7月。我们未来的重要活动还包括每双数月的中文译文讲座和单数月的写作工坊，以及明年3月出版华府作协双年刊。至于如何加入华府作协成为会员或购书细节，请大家关注华文作协的新闻以及官网。官网是 Nacwadc Web.com。今天晚上所有的英文文稿、中英文的文稿都会发表在我们的华府作协网站、华府新闻日报和美华商报，也会放在万象的电视上。谢谢大家，再次谢谢大家。
So as president of the DC chapter of the North America Chinese Writers Association, Mr. Julian Wang, who himself is a very prolific writer, wanted to come back on stage to express his deepest gratitude to everyone who has joined us this evening on the audience, and to especially thank AARP Maryland for co-sponsoring this very touching event. And especially a special thanks to the volunteer leader of AARP Maryland, the state president, which is always a volunteer position, Mr. Jim Campbell. And we were very lucky to see on the screen Hank Greenberg, Mr. Henry Hank Greenberg, who is the state director of AARP Maryland. AARP has a state office in every state, so they have now an office in Annapolis. And because we're Chinese and we're socially distanced now, everybody, let's do this to Mr. Hank Greenberg. Open up your video. Thank you so much, Mr. Hank Greenberg. And thank you, Mr. Campbell. This is our socially distanced way of expressing ourselves now. Julian also wanted to thank everyone who's contributed to this program this evening, especially the talented younger generation. The future is in great hands with millennials like Jessica Xiao, Jiaying Ding, and Shuhan Hu. And he also wanted to express his gratitude to his team, the leadership of the executive committee of this chapter. They truly put in a lot of work. And as you can see, their talents and their hard work shows through tonight. This executive committee is in their position from August of last year to July of this year. It is a 2-year term. And the most important thing that we can all look forward to is that every 2 years, they put out a biennial I guess you could call it a biennial publication, which is a compilation of their works. So we will look forward to that in March of 2022. And then most important, he wanted to let everyone know that all of the beautiful pieces in both Chinese and English will be put on their website, as well as a lot of local media, digital and in print. So we all join together to thank you all, especially before we end Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, for you coming to join in solidarity as allies together for our Chinese American community. So I will now turn it back to our MC. Thank you also, Yen, for your wonderful leadership in the community.
谢谢今天所有的来宾和作家，也非常谢谢大家参加今天我的这个活动。我们节目就到这边结束。我们在节目最后呢，会继续播出这个今天所参与的作家以及义工的一些这个资料。您可以在节目最后看到。Thank you very much for you all to attend today's event. At the end, we will still continue having the loop of the slideshow of all the authors, writers, and the translators and all the volunteers information. And please enjoy. And this concludes today's program. Thank you. Thank you.